Last week, as will be the same this week, I talked about the awkward, complicated mess of everything. And discussed a certain model, certain way of looking at things in which we move from delusion to clarity. Now, today is Vesak in many traditions. Vesak is a celebration in the Buddhist tradition. And it's a celebration of the Buddha's birth, the Buddha's passing away, and the Buddha's awakening, the Buddha's enlightenment. And according to many Buddhist traditions, all of these events happened on the same day of the year, the fifth full moon in the lunar calendar. And we, in many traditions, consider today to be that day. Now, there are a lot of different reasons for that, trying to work with the Gregorian calendar and making modern adjustments. But many traditions are referring to today as Vesak. Other traditions consider it to be happening later on in May. In any case, this morning, I and the residents at the monastic academy went to a very nice celebration put on by the Bhutanese Buddhist community. And we had the opportunity to enjoy the company, the teachings, the chanting, the happiness of the Bhutanese community here in Burlington. And you should imagine that I was sitting in the front with a few other monks who were chanting beautiful texts, and everyone was there to worship, and many of them went to the altar. There's a nice, big, beautiful, brightly colored altar, depictions of the Buddha on it, with a nice parasol over it, very carefully made. And people came to that and bowed down, prostrated before the altar. Many of the residents did the same. And I gave a talk about the Buddha's life. And what else was happening?
There was wonderful food.
There was also food, yes, there was food, of course. But what was happening while we were doing all that was that it's a Bhutanese community, you know. They're professional Buddhists. They know what they're doing. It's not like us, sort of amateur, try it out, New Age, modernist Buddhists. They're the real thing. They're the traditional thing. And so naturally, while all this sacred activity was happening, they were chatting and arguing, and the kids were running around, breaking things, and jumping on they took the mats. It was in an auditorium at Champlain Elementary School, and they took the mats down that you might use for gymnastics and put them on the floor to sit on, but no one was sitting on them because all the kids were jumping on them and pushing each other around and throwing food everywhere. Right at the altar where people were trying to prostrate. And it was a mess. It was a mess. It was messy. And many of you were there. Did it seem awful? No, not awful. And so you'll note in the title, I didn't call it the awful complicated mess of everything. It's the awkward, complicated mess of everything, because it doesn't have to be awful. It doesn't have to be terrible when kids are running around and making a mess. And adults are also milling about, maybe not running just because of a, typical lack of energy, but milling around, making a mess of things, at least socially, as we do. So that doesn't have to be so bad. And it's possible that right within that mess, you can celebrate. And as you celebrate, it stops seeming like a problem, that there are random things happening all around you. And in that way, we can settle in and enjoy the beauty of that random motion, that constant shifting of things. Because of that, because we can settle in, we can take it out to the end. We can come to the end of things. And that's the place where the beauty comes. And if you can stick with it right through the mess, and not let the mess convince you that we should stop or turn around, then we do come to the end. And the end, once you've experienced it once, you know from then on how things go. You know how things end. They end well. They end in harmony. And the disharmony is simply the process of purification of the action that is making that disharmony. It's the lesson that we learn in order to let go of whatever it is that's creating that disharmony in our own minds. So, for example, if you're sitting there and you feel like this is the Buddha's birthday celebration, and furthermore, it's the Buddha's death day celebration, and furthermore, because that is actually considered a celebration in Buddhism, he died successfully. Yes, it's very unusual that someone dies successfully. So it's something to celebrate that he pulled it off. Very few of us managed to die as a celebration. His death was one more piece of evidence for his life, for his teaching. He taught his whole life that everything is impermanent, and then his last teaching was a demonstration of that. It was in no way contradictory and in no way some kind of failure or tragedy. It was a great gift. So we celebrate that, and it's also furthermore a celebration of his enlightenment. And so what are these kids doing running around? Why can't they sit down and behave? If that's the activity in our mind, if that's how we see it, well then as we stay there and the kids keep on running around, at some point it'll happen. Because the chanting is happening too, and the nice colors and the incense. And you have a sense the food's coming right up, which was excellent. At some point, you'll just forget to be annoyed. I mean, the kids aren't that annoying. And so you forget to be annoyed. And things get better right away. Things are better immediately. The kids don't even have to stop running around. The kids are still running around and things are better, just because you forgot to be annoyed at the kids running around. And then you remember that it is annoying that the kids are running around. And things immediately get worse. It's annoying, you're annoyed, the incense doesn't smell so good, the food doesn't taste so good, the chanting doesn't sound so good. It's a mess. But you sort of stick it out. You just stay, you don't leave. For whatever reason, maybe you just feel like you shouldn't. Maybe your ride isn't leaving yet, as was probably the case for most of the residents. You can't leave, so you have to sit there, and then you forget again that kids are annoying. And you remember that kids are cute. I mean, It's pretty cute, jumping around that they're doing on that mat, that weird blue mat. Sort of amazing that they can have that much fun on that mat. But wait, they shouldn't be having fun, should they? They should be being careful. Shouldn't they be? One of them is going to fall down, they're going to get hurt, it's going to be annoying. So I might as well get annoyed even before that happens at the possibility that it might happen. Because the kid should know it might happen. I mean, she's 3. So it's bad. And then you stick around and you forget again. And it's nice again. And it turns out that maybe those kids aren't so much out of harmony. And we gradually are encouraged out of the activity of disharmony in our own minds. And it's important to be very clear that that activity is an activity. It's not a characteristic. It's not an inherent quality of our minds. It's an activity of our minds that comes and goes, just like all functions of nature. Even the Buddha's own life came and went. I was at another ceremony, a very different ceremony. It's a ceremony called a sun dance out in Colorado it's led by a Lakota group. And we were right in the depths of it, right in the middle of it. And it's an intense ceremony. Of course, there's chanting, because there's chanting in most ceremonies around the world, but it's not like the ceremony we went to today in many other ways. We were outside, for example, and a number of people were putting themselves through physical hardship as a part of the ceremony. And everything at that moment was silent. We were in the midst of prayer. And I was standing next to a good friend of mine named Joe Bob. He's from Texas and comes from he comes from sort of an uptight religious background. And there we were in silence praying, and his 2 kids, who were about 5 and 7, 2 kids came rampaging through the space. I don't know which was chasing which. I don't know why. I know that they were loud. And that nothing was actually wrong. I mean, it was okay. The kids chasing each other around outside. And Joe Bob knelt down and called them over and gathered them in and explained to them that we're in the middle of a ceremony right now. It's silent, and we need some space. And while he was in the middle of this explanation, Erlinda, who's the matriarch of the ceremony, very respected and very impressive woman, started throwing rocks at him. He just knelt down and picked up some rocks and just threw them at him whenever the next, until she hit him on the head. And he looked up and looked at her, and she was just amazed. What are you doing? What is up with you white people? This is a ceremony. So let the kids do the ceremony in the way kids do a ceremony. That's how kids do a ceremony. Like that. They run around and they push each other into the dirt and they scream. And if we do this ceremony right, then at the end of it, we'll have a mind a bit more like that. They don't need to do all this silent prayer because they don't have a constant stream of delusional concepts running through their heads. Not because they don't have the tendency to have that. They do have that tendency, and soon enough they will succeed at maintaining a constant thread of delusion through their minds. But for now, they're just not that good at it yet. And so they can just have fun, and that's a ceremony. For us, we do harder things because we need to purify our minds of all of this self-centered, self-righteous ignorance. But for them, you just let them have fun. Now, she didn't say all that. She just threw the rocks at him and then said, "They're kids," and then got back to her silent prayer. As I discussed last time, we have 3 levels of delusion. From deep delusion, which can be so deep that it indicates that there may be no end to how deep delusion for human beings can become. Then there's middling delusion, and then there is such a thing as no delusion. And then perhaps in that third, you'd say there's the path to no delusion, and then there's actually the direct experience of no delusion. In the first case, we build up a bubble. We build up a kind of a bubble around ourselves, and we make use of whatever is happening to provide evidence for whatever dream we're maintaining inside of our little world, our personal little world. And we will make use of whatever is in front of us to support this view of ourselves and the world. And once we take that view, then when we look out on the world, we're already searching for evidence to support our delusion. We're already looking. We have a certain view on things that has become part of our identity. We identify with that. And the moment we open our eyes, the moment we open our ears, the moment we open our bodies, we're already searching for evidence to support our view. And furthermore, we're already rejecting everything until it's passed the test that this will support my view. The power of this tendency is typically unknown. Most people have no idea how ubiquitous, how constant this act of delusion actually is. We've had certain experiences in the past. We've concluded that that's the way things really are. That's the way I really am. And from that point forward, we're working from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep to maintain that view on things. Of course, different people have different views on things, and that's why we fight. Because you are wrong and I'm right. And look at all of the evidence I see that proves that I'm right. I don't see evidence that you're right. I'm looking. And therefore, you're wrong. And so now we have to fight. And in that way, there is conflict. There is a sense of conflict. Okay, very good. Then what? Well, then you enter, if you wish, if you have the courage and the strength, or if you have the lack of strength, if you have the weakness, if you get to the point where you're incapable of maintaining that constantly, for whatever reason, either because you're so strong or because you're so weak, you enter what I call the awkward, complicated mess of everything. Because you start to try to break through that delusional bubble. You try to wake up from the dream that we're maintaining for ourselves. We're going to try to get out of this. Why? Because we realize that at a deep level, the entire dream is based on the word no. The whole dream, our creation of a world out of the world, is based originally on saying no to the entire world. The whole world. We say, no, I don't agree with you, I don't like you, I'm against you because I think you're against me, and so I am going to make my own little world that I'm going to live in. And everything that comes, we say first, we say no, and then we test it to see if we can trust it, see if it'll really support my position, and then we may accept some of it. And this runs our perceptions. It's so deep, of course. People think that technology has some kind of power of itself, but we see that mind is actually the most powerful thing, and that now the internet itself, when you go onto the internet, you see an excellent metaphor for how this happens. It's just a metaphor, and we came up with the internet, remember? Does everyone remember that? We invented it. We made it. The way it is that way because we made it that way. Don't forget that. I have a sense that a lot of people forget that. The internet is the way it is because we made it that way. I'm not saying it isn't the way it is. It is the way it is. But it's that way because we made it that way. It could be any other way. We just didn't make it that way. Instead, we made it this way. So there it is. And one of the ways that it is that already as soon as you start typing something into the search engine, it's already filtering results to give you what it thinks you want. You will not get an accurate view of the entire internet. You're going to get a view of the internet that is curated for your assumptions and preferences. And that, you see, is just a metaphor. It's just an internet. It's an invention. Okay, a lot of times people say, the mind is like a computer. No, the mind is not like a computer. Not at all. Computers are like certain limitations of the mind. That's true. We made computers. I'm not saying computers aren't computers. I'm just saying that computers are the way computers are because we made them that way. We could have made them any other way, but we didn't. They're that way. In the same way the internet is the way it is because we made it that way. It's not inherent. And it's that way because it's based on our minds. And our minds are already doing the real thing that the internet is just replicating. But the real thing is a subtle and constant filtering out of everything that doesn't support our bubble. But we realize at a fundamental level that word no is conflict. And our entire life is based on conflict. Therefore, our entire life is infused with suffering. And we don't want that suffering anymore. We don't want a life based on conflict from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed every day. We want at least some respite, some relief from that constant fight against everything. And so we let down our guard. And as I say, we may do this because we are mature and strong, and we may do it because we're just broken down. But it comes to the same thing. And either way, it's a step in the right direction. Either way, it's a step in the right direction. This is a moment of falling apart. At this time, we start to fall apart. And in this community, we celebrate that. We don't shame that or make use of that to take advantage of people when they start to fall apart. On the contrary, we celebrate it, we encourage it, we believe in it, we have faith in it. Just recently, I was talking to one of my students, and I said to them, "You're falling apart. That's what's happening right now. You're really falling apart." And it's unusual, I have to say, to be in a community where not only when you tell someone you're falling apart is it not an insult. Even when I just said it now, many of you may have gotten that emotional tone. But, oh no, falling apart. But not only is it not an insult, not only is it not a criticism, on the contrary, it's a statement of excitement. The what I felt at the time was proud. I was proud of this person. Amazing. Here you are. You are doing what people are unwilling to do. Most people just stay in this shell. And that shell is what they think they are. And we truly identify with it. And that shell is now breaking apart. And therefore it feels like I'm breaking apart. But really, we're not that shell. We never were that shell. That shell was never us. Not for a moment. We created it, yes, but it was never who we are. And that starts to break up. And when that breaking up happens, all kinds of junk will come in. And all kinds of junk will go out. And that is what you call the awkward, complicated mess of everything. And you have to work with that. And the question is, are we going to stay with that? In particular, are we going to stay with that in relationships? Because in the same way that we have our different bubbles and they conflict and then we don't like each other, when those bubbles start to break apart, we really don't like each other. We really get mixed up with each other's stuff. We're all confused. And the question at the time is, can we stay with it? Can we stay with it? And I have to say that it's, for us, we deeply believe in how we feel. How we feel is what we believe in. We're really interested in how we feel. And we identify with it. We feel like how I feel is really me. And a lot of the time when we enter this stage, we'll say something like, I really feel uncomfortable right now. I really feel like this isn't right. I really feel like this is the wrong direction. I really feel unsafe. I really feel like I need to do something else. And we have that sense, and it grabs us and asks us, please rebuild that wall. Let's go back into that little cave. Let's just head back in there because this is awkward and complicated and messy. And I don't know what the end of this is because we just open up a little crack and things are going badly. I feel that this is not right for me right now. I hear those words almost every day. I feel that this isn't right I need to be ready for this. Yeah, this shell is never ready. Ever. It will never be ready. The shell is going to break. And the question is, are you going to participate in that process and add your skill to it? You're going to resist it. If you participate in the process, then you're entering this in a wonderful way that will end in good things. If you don't, it's just going to be pure suffering. But the shell is breaking. It's already broken. It's never going to hold together. So we have to see that we don't ultimately have the ability to choose to complain to somebody so that things will break apart in the perfect way. We enter then this place, this awkward place, where people are pushing our buttons and we don't know why or how, and we are pushing their buttons and nobody knows why or how. It's just happening and happening. And at that point, do we have the faith to keep learning how to say yes to each next step? Are we learning marginally how to say yes so that this getting entrenched and entangled in each other's stuff slowly starts to feel more like getting intimate, becoming friends, getting to know each other in an honest way? That shift can happen. And the worst, it's so hard for us. It's one of the worst experiences of our lives when we're truly in conflict with someone and we feel we can't trust them. That can shift to a harmonious relationship in which we realize we can trust them. And we learn in that moment who we are and who they are. As we do that, we finally enter the path to no delusion, which is joyous, in which every next experience is received with faith, with wonder, with excitement, with exhilaration. Each next experience cleans off the views that we carry, rather than is used to uphold the views that we carry. In this third stage, we are so present that we begin to have the experience of having more time than we used to. Which is to say that in a given day, we have more experiences than we used to. And in fact, we can get to the point when it is possible to get to the point when we have more experiences in one day than we had in the rest of our lives before that day. This is possible. We can become that present that every moment is like a whole day. We have the full experience of each moment arising and collapsing, coming together and breaking apart. And every time that happens, it isn't just some observation of some phenomenon over there. The person who is experiencing that, the mind that is experiencing that, also is born and dies, is fully experienced and is fully abandoned. And in that moment of abandoning, that another aspect of the shell is lost. And that happens, well, once a day, 10 times a day, 100 times a day, 1,000 times a day. And as we're on that path, we come to the point when it no longer appears that there is this shell of self-centered, self-righteous, afraid delusion. And every now and then we get glimpses of clarity within it. A shift happens. A magical shift happens when there's clarity, boundless, endless, inconceivable clarity. And within that, delusion comes and goes. Our lives come and go within that clarity. It's no longer that clarity comes and goes within our lives. And at that point, we just track that life, that person, that ego, that shell, as it comes and goes. And each next time we fully experience it, that aspect of it is resolved. That aspect of the conflict is harmonized until there is the experience of a complete dropping of identity, of delusion, of conflict. Such an experience does exist. There is such a thing as that experience. And it is then possible, having completely freed our minds from everything that we think of as mind, having truly experienced liberation, it's possible to then say yes in the ultimate sense, which is to say that we can re-enter the world of delusion. We say yes even to saying no. And in re-entering that world, we are capable of serving. We're capable of helping people who are not capable of leaving that world, who do not have the faith that it would be worth letting the bubble break apart and entering the awkward, complicated mess of everything. We then become a beacon of hope, letting people know that I know it feels like it's safe in there, but that is the least safe place there is. There is no safety there. It's a world based on conflict, and there's such a thing as resolution of that conflict. That is safety. That's happiness. That's truth. And at that time, each of our relationships becomes seen as a gift. And we don't know who's giving the gift to who. It's totally unknown who's giving what to who. That's completely lost. Am I giving love to you? Are you giving love to me? Are you purifying my mind? Am I purifying your mind? We don't know anymore, because there's no need to know that anymore, because there's just harmony. That harmony is our guide rather than a sense of self. So, it's worth it. It's worth sitting there with the kids as they jump around and throw food at the altar. It's worth staying with someone as they say things that offend you, that make you afraid, that disrespect you. It's worth it staying in a community, even while that community does all the things that human beings do. It's worth it to stay with it. Because if we stay with it, we will discover where it ends. And it's better to discover where one thing ends than to merely experience the beginning, the shallow aspect of countless things through a lifetime. To take just one thing and end it, come to the end of it. This gives us access to a harmony, a truth that we can truly have faith in. Bring your attention to your body. Pay attention to body sensations. And stay with your body. Practice attending to your body, staying with body sensations. As you attempt to stay with body sensations, it is possible that one or more of the three basic mistakes, the three basic problems, it's possible that one or more of these will arise. We call these greed, hatred, and ignorance. What is greed? Greed means that you have a body sensation that you like, and you grab onto it and want it to continue. For example, you might feel relaxed. And you want to feel relaxed. You want more relaxation. You want it to last forever. And so you grab onto it. This is called greed. Hatred means that some sensation arises that you don't like, and you want to get rid of it. You resist it. Perhaps there's pain in your body. You have that experience. You tighten up against it. Try to make it go away. Insulate yourself from it. And ignorance means that you're not paying attention to body sensations, typically because your attention goes elsewhere. You're not aware of your body at a certain moment. So greed means that we've grabbed on to something that's already happened. Hatred means that we're pushing away something that's already happened. And ignorance means that we're paying attention to something else, not present with what is happening. For now, without trying to stop yourself from having these experiences, simply notice if those experiences are arising. It's possible that you're experiencing greed, possible that you're experiencing hatred, possible that you're experiencing ignorance. It's also possible that you're not noticing any of those three things right now, and you are present with body sensations. So, from your perspective, one of those four circumstances is taking place. Track which one is taking place. If you're holding on to a certain sensation, allow yourself to do that. Just pay attention to what that's like. If you're rejecting a certain sensation, allow yourself to do that. See what that's like. And mysteriously, even if you're ignorant, you're not aware of what's happening, not aware of body sensations, allow that and see what that's like. If you find yourself holding on to a certain sensation, you want to feel a certain way, pay attention to that. If you're not doing that, if you're not holding on, trying to make yourself feel a certain kind of sensation, pay attention to that. For example, if you want the peace and quiet It comes when the children of your body sensations calm down. Fine. Let yourself want that. And if you have the peace that comes from allowing your body sensations to run around like children, attend to that. If you have a grasping on, experience that fully. And if you don't, experience that fully. If you feel anger, dislike, annoyance at the body sensations that are present as they run around in your body like children, fine. Let yourself feel that. And if you don't feel angry or annoyed, fine. Let yourself feel that. You have a sense of pushing away body sensations, then good. What's that like? You have a sense of letting them flow freely. Fine. What's that like? You may be grabbing on. You may be pushing away. You may be doing neither. What are each of these states of mind like? We're just examining that right now. Very good. I will ring the bell in a moment, and you're invited to move around. As you do that, continue with this technique. Paying attention to what it's like when we grab on to a certain kind of experience, what it's like when we push away a certain kind of experience, what it's like when we do neither, when we have equanimity with this experience. There's no need to have a preference between these three. Whichever one is happening, it's our opportunity to pay attention to that. In a few minutes, I'll ring the bell again, and then we'll come back, continue with the practice in stillness. And continue with that technique, paying attention at any given moment. Right now, am I grasping on or not? Am I pushing away or not? And without trying to change any of that, without preferring any one of those states over the other, pay attention to what each is. What is the experience that comes with grabbing on, pushing away, or doing neither? And now bring in the final element. If you find that you are paying attention to body sensations, very good. What is that experience? And if you find that you're not, that you're distracted by something else, then what is that experience? It is possible to be aware of not being aware. It's possible to know that you don't know what's happening in your body. The challenge, if you find that, if you become distracted, as we say, the challenge is that before trying to bring your attention back, pay attention to what it's like to not be paying attention to body sensations. And certainly, before berating yourself, attacking yourself for getting distracted. If you berate yourself and attack yourself, very good. Pay attention to what that's like. What is it like to feel that kind of hatred? And when it ceases, what's that like? But even before that, attend to what is the experience of not knowing what's happening in your body. And if you find that you are, once again, focusing on your body, for example, if you choose to bring your attention back to your body, what is that like? What is that experience? In this way, we're investigating. We're investigating 4 different possibilities. 1, we're grabbing on to something. 2, we're pushing something away. 3, we're ignoring. We don't know what's happening. And 4, none of those activities are happening right now. With each of them, we're paying attention. We're paying attention to what that's like. What is that experience? In this way, while we maintain the practice of attending to body sensations, within that context we explore the experience of grabbing on to a certain kind of body sensation or not, pushing away a certain kind of body sensation or not, ignoring body sensations by getting distracted or not. We investigate this. Investigate it. And if we find that the technique is really working for us, we may find that we then grab on to that. If we feel that it's not working for us, we may try to push it away. Or go somewhere else. But you can recycle that right back into the technique again. And know, this is what it's like to push something away. This is what it's like to wander elsewhere. This is what it's like to grab on. This is what it's like to not do any of that. And in this way, we explore the difference between conflict and non-conflict. Between being out of harmony and being in harmony. And in this way, everything becomes an opportunity. You have a pleasant body sensation, it's an opportunity. Because you either will or will not grab on to it. You can investigate either one. You have an unpleasant body sensation. Itches or aches, pressures or pains, exhaustion. tightness. It's an opportunity. You may or may not push that away. If you do, you can investigate that. If you don't, you can investigate that. And the same with distraction, ignorance of what's happening in your body. If you get distracted, it's suddenly an opportunity. In just the same way that concentrating is an opportunity, because you can investigate what is that like? What is that experience? Continue to explore these various activities or lack thereof. this is a time for questions or comments. So please feel free to report or ask whatever you'd like. Mm-hmm.
Why did you ask us to attach such powerfully negative labels of ignorance, hatred, and greed to an hour of focused meditation in our body sensation, which was a positive experience, I believe, but I was still kind of caught off guard by your initial labels.
Yeah. The main reason was that I was interested in bringing into relief the presence or absence of those experiences. They may be present, they may be absent. And if they are present, then they are having the impact of developing this bubble. That's what they do. They form that bubble. And I wanted to help you to experiment with allowing that bubble to fall apart a little bit. Also, that was, of course, I could have changed it. I also just went with the fact that that is their traditional name. Each of them, that's the typical way of translating each of those words. So I didn't change it. Of course, I could have changed it, but I decided not to in order to bring them into a bit more stark relief. Naturally, they have that negative connotation. But even if that comes up, of course, we acknowledge that as a kind of hatred. As if we have a sense of this is a bad thing that we should get rid of, well, then we acknowledge that that's an instance of hatred arising. So we can recycle it back into the technique in any case. Yes.
Well, just to check in on my experience, actually those words were very relevant, which I didn't know when I started the exercise, but as I was in hatred
Yeah.
of an emotion, and what it kind of, as I stayed with it, I realized it wasn't hatred, it was like rage.
Uh-huh.
It was rage, and once I got in touch with the rage and I stayed with the rage, it was so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable, and I kept trying to stay with it. And yeah, it didn't really break, well, it did break apart a little bit towards the end. But I got the sense that this was something that was going to possibly take a while to break apart.
So you said you felt, if I'm not mistaken, you said you felt anger at a certain emotion. So was the rage in response to something, or was it there in itself?
It was a response to a body sensation.
Yep. So you had a body sensation, and then you had another body sensation, rage, in response to that. Is that correct?
Okay.
Well, I'm asking. Is that true?
I was trying to stay with the hatred.
Yeah. So the hatred, so you had a certain body sensation,
Right.
and then you had hatred towards it.
Right.
Was that a body sensation?
I guess it was. Yeah, I'd have to say yes.
I'm not trying to convince you.
Right. No, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Is that how
It
you
was.
experienced it?
Yeah.
If not, it's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah. I think so.
But maybe not.
It was so all encompassing. So
Yeah.
I guess you could say it was a full body experience.
Yeah, your whole body was reacting to something happening within your body, and it was attempting to reject it, attempting to fight against it.
Well, it was my body that it was the focus of the rage.
Yeah. The rage was directed at your body,
Yes.
at a certain sensation. And then the sensation had a certain kind of discomfort to it, the original sensation.
Right.
And then the anger, the rage, the hatred, had its own kind of discomfort associated with it.
Right. Well, the original sensation was mild.
Uh-huh. It was uncomfortable, though?
It was uncomfortable, but mildly uncomfortable. But the rage was really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yes. And so there was a incentive. There was a draw to not experiencing the rage that was nonetheless present.
You mean that I wanted to pull back from the rage?
Now you had the sensation, had the rage also, and there was a draw to not staying with that, to becoming ignorant about it.
There was, but I was clear that I was going to stay with it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't moving away from it.
I guess my question though is, you weren't moving away from it, but that took a certain amount of willpower. There was a... Were you attracted to staying with it? Did you have the sense that it would be good, it would be enjoyable, it would be nice to stay with this rage?
No.
So there was a sense maybe
But
I
I was clear that there was something really big going on.
Yeah.
That was worthwhile to stay with. So it was more like that part of me that knew.
Great.
You stay with this because this is important here.
Great. So there was a kind of attraction to it. There was a curiosity as well.
I suppose, yes.
A sense that maybe if I stay with this, it will shift in some valuable way. Uh-huh. Good. Well, that is what carries us through this. The faith that there is such a resolution, and we have to move through it in order to find that resolution. The reason I was asking about not wanting to pay attention to it is that oftentimes there is some mild discomfort. There's then hatred that is stuck onto that. And why? Well, because we don't want this one. We don't want this one to be here. So we're going to attack it. But then we don't want this one. This made it worse. Now we don't want this one. So one thing we do, of course, is add more hatred. That's a possible strategy, which we might do for a while and build up layers, but it keeps on not working. It gets worse and worse. But then we remember, good news. We have 2 more tools in the toolbox here, and one of them is ignorance. So that's good. We could try that. And then you have the original sensation covered over by hatred, which we then try to cover over with ignorance. Yes? And this is how we create the layers that form our little bubble, our little prison. That's how it's built up. And so you're observing the process of construction. It's very, very significant and very powerful. Because once something has been overlaid with ignorance, that's like the cement, you know? The greed and hatred is kind of like the bricks that you use to construct the prison, but then the mortar, the cement, that doesn't really keep it in position. So if you ignore it, then suddenly it's like it's not there. And then it has enormous power. Because it starts to feel like reality. It's strange, isn't it? It's paradoxical that when we stop paying attention to something, we have the impression that it is real. It's very strange the way that is, but in fact it is how it is. Because when it arises, it appears to arise of itself. So we think it has some kind of inherent existence. And so then exactly the thing you did is how we get out. because you bring up a sense of faith that there's a way out, and even a sense of curiosity about it. What would happen if I stayed with this? What would that resolution be? And that is how we dig back down through those layers. That's a very good report, yes? Yeah, wonderful hour meditation. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about preferences in terms of, I've heard a Zen saying that the way, this is my extrapolation from, I don't know if this is exactly it, the way is not easy except for those who have no preferences.
Mm-hmm.
So I notice in my meditation that it isn't so solid that I'll attack something so I don't have to have it. But I'll notice that it's kind of wavy and
Yeah.
undulating
Yeah.
and very ephemeral.
Yeah.
And I'm with it and I'm with it and with it, and then something comes. And there's this, nanosecond, it's not even like that, where there's a preference.
Uh-huh.
And it isn't just the thought of it, and not anything and no attachment to it changes, everything just flows.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nothing. But then I think to myself, this is in general. Well, maybe you shouldn't even have that. Even though it's not, it's so wispy, you shouldn't even have that. And then I just, it doesn't matter. But I see that going on a lot, even though it's so wispy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder about that. I don't even know what to ask about it. It's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then I start thinking about, the Zen saying. This is just the Zen saying. Maybe a wish that I didn't have any preferences. Wouldn't it be great to walk through the world without any preferences? But when I was hearing you talk to this woman in front of me, I was seeing that you were talking about, it seemed you were talking about it's like choosing or being okay with, and even it's nice that you're looking at all of this. So it doesn't matter whether you have preferences or no preferences, because it's all just flow anyway, sort of. I'm just curious about preferences, and it's like saying, well, do no harm. It's better not to create more. It's better. You got to do something, so it's better to do something good. And you get my gist.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It is an interesting line. That's from a poem by the third Zen master after Bodhidharma. A famous poem. The great way is without difficulty. Simply have no preferences. Simply don't pick and choose. great way is without difficulty. Very nice line. Shido Munan. Wonderful, wonderful line. Just don't pick and choose. In other words, have equanimity. That's the word that we tend to use. Have equanimity. The great way is without difficulty. Just have equanimity. And the question then is, okay, well, how do you do that? And Zen enjoys, especially in its poetry, enjoys putting people in that position. It's not that it's a bad poem because it clearly indicates that you should not pick and choose. But isn't that picking and choosing? Aren't you telling us to choose not to choose? So isn't that hypocritical? And Zen likes playing with that sort of thing. Of course, it's not that they're being mean or something, not even that they're really being tricky. They just, the goal is to put us in this bind that we're already in, to show us that we're caught, to demonstrate it in that moment. Because it's the moment of feeling like, well, wait, how am I supposed to not be supposed to do things? How I shouldn't think I should do something. And that is what I call the awkward mess. That's exactly the place that the poem, in its very first line, it's an incredibly brilliant poem. And yet in its first line, it immediately deposits us in confusion, which is what it is meant to do. It's not a mistake. So there we are. We're given the advice, as the Buddha said, don't cling. Our task is to cut off craving. But how do you cut off craving without using craving? Don't you want to get rid of wanting? Don't you have a desire to transcend desire? So how could you desire to transcend desire without creating desire? It's not working. But again, that's exactly what the teaching is supposed to do, to put us into a bind, so that we have to find the resolution in a direct experience. There is such a thing as not having preferences, not picking and choosing. How do you get there? It turned out to be very difficult to teach this. And we see the problems in the various world traditions. We even see the problems in the techniques that I teach, that we teach right here. The techniques aren't perfect. And we attempt to give help, but we know that all of them have certain flaws. One of the things that we can be proud of is simply acknowledging that the teachings have limitations, that the teachings have flaws. When we stop acknowledging that, there are big problems that come forth very fast. We get attached to something that's not worth getting attached to. But we acknowledge their limitations. It's really about your own exploration. That's what matters. And that's what I was attempting to convey earlier, that it's the exploration that matters. So, what does that mean practically? Practically speaking, we apply the no preferences to whatever is happening. And you just keep on applying it. You don't really worry about some kind of theoretical consistency. It's a method, not a view. And the method is have no preferences. And you can say, yeah, but it's hypocritical because you're saying you're preferring having no preferences. But it actually isn't hypocritical because it's not a doctrine, it's a method. You see the difference?
Yeah, it's a technique.
It's a
technique, it's not an end game.
Exactly. This isn't the end game, it's a technique. That's exactly right. So if you say, well, I don't want to have preferences, you say, okay, great, it's fine to not want to have preferences. What is that like? what is the experience of not wanting to have preferences as a preference? What is that like? And you accept it and receive it and experience it just as it is. And then you say, well, it's great. I want to keep this. You say, okay, great. What is that like to want to hold on to this? Yes? Or you say, I don't like this. This is terrible. I hate this. Very good. And what's that like to hate it? Right? And you just keep on reapplying the method. That's why it's the great way is without difficulty. It didn't say the great end. Yes, is without difficulty. The great way, this way, why? Because you just keep on applying the same point of accept this without preference, and this, and this, and this. To the point that even if you're filled with hatred, you say yes to that. If you're not, you say yes to that. And by reapplying the same method, mysteriously something else happens. And you realize that the whole thing was a ruse. The whole thing was actually just a distraction from your distraction. The whole thing, all these religious teachings were never the point, but they had to seem to be the point, or else we wouldn't have thrown ourselves into them, so that we could get out of the way, so that some other thing could happen that none of the religious teachings describe. That it's beyond words, beyond conceptualization. So again, it's a method. You throw yourself in, and again reapply the same thing, and then it's amazing. You're curious, and you find something happens. It's a deep faith that something will happen that allows us to continue to reapply the method. So does that, if I responded to what you're asking, very good. If not, we can clarify further.
So then it makes me think about the finger pointing at the moon, right?
Right.
That's what that is.
Right, exactly. Yep, that's what these teachings are. Yep, you really should look at that finger. And if you look closely enough, you'll look away from it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You all know this. It's from, I believe, the Shurangama Sutra. I think that's the first place it was ever used. Does anyone know of an earlier use of that metaphor? Shurangama Sutra is the place they say that all of these teachings are like a finger pointing at the moon. If you mistake the finger for the moon, then you lose both the moon and the finger. So it has a use. All of these teachings have a purpose, but they're pointing at our own direct experience, which isn't described. We have to use the teachings and the methods to see the thing that they're referring to, that they're pointing towards. And if you think that the teachings are the thing, then you've lost both the point, but you've even lost the teachings, because they're no longer the way, they've become the end. But they're not the end, they're the way. So you've lost both of them. So it's a very useful metaphor.
So there is no end.
I don't know that I would say that. I don't know that I would say that there is no end.
In this messy mess.
Yeah, I can't say if there's an end. I'm not in a position to say that.